Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Virtual Planetarium for October with Pete Lawrence and myself, Paul Abel. And as ever, we're going to start with the inner solar system. Mercury is fairly challenging this month, so
Yes, it is.
It's an evening object, but sets close to sunset, and consequently, we're really not going to see much of it, are we?
It's not been a good year for Mercury, actually. We haven't had many opportunities when we could see it that well. Venus, which is in the evening sky as well as Mercury, has been there for a little while, but its too is not in a perfect position. It's setting 50 minutes after the sun on the 1st of October, but that offset starts to increase this month, so that by the end of October, it'll be nearly 90 minutes. And with the skies getting darker, it should be a beacon that we can start to see. There's a 7% lit waxing crescent moon 3.7 degrees to the south of Venus on the 5th of October, but that is quite low down. It's at the wrong end of the month, really, and that sets about 30 minutes after sunset.
Yeah, the thing is with Venus, it's in that part of its orbit where it just languishes low in the evening twilight, really low down. But as you say, it will start to pick up, and by the end of the year, will become quite a striking object. The next planet out, however, Mars. Plenty to see here. Now, we're recording this in August 2024, and this last week, a new dust storm has erupted on Mars. So this started in near to the Erythraeum region, which isn't far from the Solis Lacus region on Mars, and quite a big dust storm. Some impressive images by Clyde Foster and others. So this will throw dust into the air and may start to change the markings. So Mars is already quite active, and it's well worth keeping an eye on.
How usual is that this early on in the season? Well, I suppose it depends on Mars's position relative to the sun, isn't it?
That's right. So we are at the tail end now of the Martian dust storm season. So there's a well-defined period of when these large dust storms start on Mars, and we are towards the end of that, but it's not unknown. People have observed dust storms starting towards the end of the season, but yeah, it's quite exciting. No one's sure yet whether it'll be a huge global one or just a large regional one, but there'll be changes to the surface features of Mars by the time people are starting to observe it in October.
Fantastic. Okay, well, it's a morning planet at the moment in Gemini, reaching 55 degrees altitude under darkness at the start of October. Shines at magnitude plus 0.4 and appears 56 minutes, arc minutes rather, from magnitude plus 3.5 WASAT, which is Delta Geminorum, on the 8th of October. That's quite close to that star, actually. Okay. It's a very bright star. And it's visited by a 61% lit waning gibbous moon on the morning of the 23rd of October, and the last quarter moon on the 23rd into the 24th of October, so that's the following night. By the end of October, Mars reaches peak altitude just as darkness lifts, and on the 31st it shines at plus 0.1, so getting a little bit brighter, and appears 9 arc seconds across through the eyepiece.
So that's actually quite a reasonable size now. So with the 6-inch telescope, fair seeing, a number of surface features should be becoming visible. So Mars is becoming quite a nice viable object. Next planet out, of course, Jupiter, and this comes to opposition on the 7th of December. And with the nights getting increasingly longer now, it becomes quite a good time to enjoy the views of this planet. And one of the things I really love about Jupiter, apart from its obvious very large size, is the fact that it rotates in under 10 hours, which means you really can see the surface features, the great red spot and the various bits in the belts and zones, starting to drift after 15 minutes. So if you spend a good couple of hours observing, or even an hour observing Jupiter, you'll notice that the markings drifting across the surface during the course of that hour.
I know it's a fantastic planet in that respect. It's a great one to image as well. It's just there's so much detail there. It's quite a fascinating world to keep an eye on. And on the 1st of October, it's rising at about 2140 BST, which is fairly early in the evening. And it's pretty bright as well. It's about mag minus 2.3, which is the brightest thing in that part of the sky, so pretty obvious to see. There's an 81% lit waning gibbous moon, 5.6 degrees to the north of Jupiter on the morning of the 21st of October. That can be quite a stunning sight, can't it?
Yeah, I quite like those. They really are quite impressive sights. So plenty going on with Jupiter at the moment. And of course, Saturn, as we did in last month's Virtual Planetarium, came to opposition on the 7th of September. And so it's going to be well placed for the rest of the month. I've been observing it. The rings really are now quite narrow. But one of the fun things about this time of Saturn's year, when its rings are very thin or edgewise onto the Earth, is the crossing of the satellites and their shadows over the planet Saturn. And that's quite rare. It happens with Jupiter all the time, fairly frequently, but it's much more rare with Saturn. And we have some events coming up that we'll talk about in a minute.
Yes, I think everybody's going to be sick of these events by the end of 2025.
No one should be sick of them, because it'll be years.
There are plenty of them, and they are quite exciting, actually, to watch. I mean, as you mentioned just now, we're recording this in August. It's the end of August, and so we've just had an occultation of Saturn by the Moon, which was, I haven't seen one of those since 2007. There is another one coming up, actually, so if you'd missed it, don't worry. There's another one at the beginning of 2025 to look forward to. But I think Saturn, now it's getting higher in the sky, is going to take the crown for interest. I mean, Jupiter is a very interesting planet. Mars is going to be vying for interest, coming to opposition next year. But Saturn is suddenly going to be a major target for UK-based astronomers to start looking at. And rightly so. It's a fantastic world.
It is indeed. Well, that's Saturn. We should say that on the morning of the 14th of October, Saturn sits just 0.9 degrees north of an 89% lit waxing gibbous moon, centre as darkness falls. So that's another nice event to watch out for. Moving on to the ice giants now. Uranus, well, best to see really at the end of the month. It's magnitude plus 5.7, currently located some 5.5 degrees south by southwest of the Pleiades open cluster, so that's a nice target to use to try and find it. It reaches peak altitude of about 56 degrees due south under dark sky conditions all month, so it's actually a good time to try it.
Yeah, it is. And, that location near the Pleiades is quite significant, actually, because over previous years it's been sort of trundling along through Pisces and into Aries, which aren't well known for their guiding stars. But now it's going to be close to the Pleiades. Hopefully, people will be able to find it in a easier, so they'll be able to go out and actually look at this amazing world. And we may see some new observations. I mean, you can see atmospheric banding on the planet.
You can. It's quite interesting because, as we all know, Uranus orbits the sun on its side, but I think it's its North Pole that's kind of face on to us at the minute.
Yeah.
So you kind of got the equator all around and the North Pole. But there does seem, I've seen in images, and I've convinced myself, Pete, that I've seen it with the 12-inch telescope, there does seem to be a kind of North Polar cap that's darker, that's visible, and it's not always present. So it just goes to show that even with something as remote as Uranus, observations are needed, because we still don't know really to what degree the cloud features and various objects on Uranus vary. So the observations are needed.
Well, Uranus and Neptune tend to be sort of brushed into the difficult cupboard, don't they?
They do.
Yes,
yeah.
And people don't tend to look at them because they're not as dynamic as the gas giants, Jupiter and Saturn.
No.
So, I think there is plenty to see there, and it's a very interesting world to try and to get to grips with. And, of course, you've got the moons, which you can grab with imaging kit. You can see them with a big telescope as well. But they are fascinating to watch. And the same goes with Neptune, actually. Neptune is a very challenging planet. It's a long way out in the solar system. And it's not in a particularly good position to locate it if you don't know your sky very well. It's southeast of the faint circlet asterism in Pisces at the moment. And if you want a rough guide, it's currently positioned approximately midway between mag plus 4.5 lambda Piscium, and mag 4.3 30 Piscium. So if you can find those two stars, you should be able to find Neptune. But the really weird thing about Neptune being so far out, I mean, it's got its own moons, obviously, but you can pick up Triton quite easily, can't you?
Yeah, I have seen it with the 8-inch telescope, but it had to be quite a dark, transparent night with no haze and no moonlight around. But it's easier with the 12-inch telescope. I've never seen the other moon, Nereid, because that's incredibly difficult. But
yes,
Triton isn't too difficult. In fact, in many ways, Triton's easier than some of the moons of Uranus.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, let's move on to some of the specials. And there is a definite special, which you'd probably be aware of, which is a comet, which should be coming into view this month. And we'll deal with that. We'll mention it here, but we'll deal with it in its own little section after we've gone through our special. So let's start off with a rather beautiful 1% lit waning crescent moon hanging low above the eastern horizon around 6 o'clock BST on the 1st of October. Now you might think, well, what's special about that? But it's in a good position in October. It's the positioning relative to the horizon places it optimally above the horizon. And I have observed thin moons at this time of year in the morning sky. And there's something quite ethereal about them. They're just, I can always remember one I did many years ago now. I set the telescope up. I knew it was there, set the mount up. And what I hadn't taken into consideration was the fact that there was a hedge in the way. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, I was out with the hedge trimmers, cutting a right angle out of the corner of the hedge, which didn't go down particularly well. But I did manage to catch it. And I can always remember seeing this beautiful thin crescent and just birds in the distance flying against it. And there was something, it looked like something out of Jurassic Park, actually, like sort of a dinosaur scene. It's difficult to explain, but it is quite a beautiful sight.
I don't know. I think your imagination's on fire today. So I'm really struggling to see the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park and a crescent moon. But for the sake of moving on with the VP, I'll let you have it.
Pterodactyls in Selzy, you know.
Yeah, no, I don't doubt that. But it's they are very pretty sights. It's one of those things because my garden's a bit more built up than yours, obviously. So I have to very often these low crescent moons I've caught has been when I've been coming back from the university in the evening, and you walking across the park and you see them. I know what you mean. They do have this slightly ethereal quality. They really are very very pretty.
Yeah, they are. Okay, well, there's another moon which is of interest. We've mentioned Saturn and its moons and crossings and whatever, but this isn't actually a crossing. On the 3rd of October at 2100 UT or 2200 BST, a telescopic view of Saturn will show Titan, its largest moon, just 6 arc-seconds south of its pole, southern pole. So, yeah, that's worth catching an early view of Titan. Get the feel for what the moon looks like. That's what that's all about.
Absolutely. And on the 5th, the shadow of Saturn's moon Dione is in transit between 2328 to 0236 BT, or if you prefer, 2228 to 0136 UT. So that'll be nice. You will need a larger telescope to do that. Although shadows of moons are usually very dark, they're black. It'll be. I think you probably need at least an 8-inch telescope to see that. Yeah,
they're very small, aren't they? And can be difficult to see. On the 9th, there's another shadow crossing on Saturn, which is due to Rhea's shadow transiting. That occurs between 2144 and 0112 BST on the night of the 9th into the 10th of October. That's also when you get the peak of the southern Taurid meteor shower, by the way, which is, it's got a ZHR of 5 meteors per hour. Woo! And it, but it actually, it's quite a good shower because it's one of 2 active in that region. You've got this is the southern Taurids we're talking about. You've also got the northern Taurid shower, which has got a similar ZHR. But the peak is really broad. It's many days broad, unlike things like the Perseids or the Quadrantids, which is just a few hours. With these meteor showers, you've got several days to witness them. So you can often be out observing, and then suddenly there's a bright meteor going down across the sky, and you think, oh, I wonder what that was. And it may well be a Taurid. Not a guarantee, of course, but yeah, it's an interesting shower, really.
Yeah, worth keeping an eye out, so particularly if you're out there observing the transit of Rhea's shadow. On the 11th, Saturn's moon Titan again. This now appears 5 arc seconds north of the planet's northern pole in the evening.
So it's gone around half an orbit.
Gone around half an orbit, and on the 15th, and we'll say more about this in a minute, Comet C 2023 A3 Sushishan Atlas sits just 1.4 degrees from the beautiful MAG 5.8 globular cluster M5. That's in Serpens in the evening, so predicted to be around third magnitude, but we'll discuss more of that in a moment.
Yeah. Okay, well, the shadow of Saturn's moon Dione transits the planet's globe between 2217 and 0126 BST on the 16th of October. And on the 17th of October is our own moon back in the limelight again, which is a full moon occurring just 10 hours and 40 minutes after lunar perigee, which makes it a perigee full moon. What is the relevance of a perigee full moon? Well, it's a little
I'm not going to say it. If you want me to say the word supermoon, I refuse.
Oh, you've said it now. Now you're going to get letters accusing yourself of selling out. No, we don't call it that. We call it a perigee full moon. And
yes.
the reason why there would be any interest in it at all is that it's slightly bigger and slightly brighter than an average full moon, but it's really quite subtle. And compared to last month's full moon and next month's full moon, you wouldn't notice any difference.
No.
So it's a bit of a hyped element in astronomy at the moment. So we just have to run with it and just keep trying to use the proper terms.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, again on the 18th, as I say, you get sick of these soon. You've got Rhea's shadow crossing Saturn's disk again between 2240 and 0210 BST. That's on the 18th into the 19th.
And on the 19th, we do have a nice event here. This is a 91% lit waning gibbous moon passes across the southern portion of the Pleiades open cluster. So that's a nice thing to watch out for. Also on that same evening, Titan appears 7 arc seconds south of the southern pole as darkness falls at around 1923 BST.
On the 20th, we have on the night of the 20th into the 21st, we've got the peak night for the Orionid meteor shower. The predicted peak actually occurs on the morning of the 21st, but there's going to be a bright gibbous moon in the way this year, which is going to mess things up. On the 26th, we skip planets to Jupiter, where we've got an excellent Ganymede shadow transit to look forward to. That starts at 2331 BST and concludes at 0151 BST. That's always quite an interesting thing to see, because Ganymede, being the biggest moon in the solar system, the shadow is quite noticeable, isn't it?
It is. It's huge, actually. I think that was probably. I don't know. I must check. Actually, I wonder what's the smallest telescope you can see that in, because it is such a large black shadow on Jupiter.
I don't know. I would imagine it's probably a 3-inch, something like that.
Yeah, I imagine you would easily see it in a 3-inch telescope.
Yeah. Well, on the 27th, we could just say that British summertime ends and the UK clocks will revert back by 1 hour to at 2 o'clock in the morning, BST, to become 1 o'clock in the morning, universal time. I can hear a little cheer from Paul, even though you can't hear it.
I do prefer universal time, but there we are. We should also mention on the 27th, Dione and Rhea's shadows are in transit across the disk of Saturn again tonight. So on this night, Dione is between 2205 and 2314 UT, and Rhea from 2223 until the planet sets at around 0200 on the 28th of October. So those events go from the 27th to the 28th. So that might be worth catching.
Okay, right, on to Comet C 2023 A3 Sushishan Atlas. It takes centre stage this month, having reached perihelion on the 27th of September. At that time, it would have been incredibly close to the sun. That's when it will also have been at its brightest. So I suspect the big question that is on everybody's mind at the moment is going to be how bright's it going to get. And here things get a little bit interesting. When it was first announced, it was said it could get up to about magnitude -2, -3, and then it sort of got a bit more moderated down to about magnitude 2 it's stuck at for a long time. This is the peak magnitude. I think at the moment we're currently looking at possibly below that, possibly about between 3 and 4, which who can tell? You don't exactly know what's going to happen. As it swings around perihelion, it's going to get a bit of a shock because it's going to be exposed to the sun's radiation. So anything can happen to the nucleus. It could evaporate into nothing. It could just carry on as it is at the moment, or it could fragment. If it fragments, a lot of dust will be generated, and then things get very interesting. So anybody that makes a hard and fast prediction on this at the moment is just making things up, really, because comets do unexpected things. And I think the biggest thing you need to take from it is that there is the potential for a bright comet there, and that's just interesting in its own right. So where could you see it? Well, basically, it will be very close to the sun at the beginning of October. I think you'll start to be able to pick it up low above the western section of the horizon, probably from about the 12th of October onwards. And then it will creep away. Paul mentioned earlier on that it actually goes past the globular cluster, Messier 5, on the evening of the 15th of October. So that's a good way to locate it. If it is bright, everybody will be shouting about it. Everybody will be taking photographs about it, and it'll be easy to pick up. If it's fainter, everybody will still be trying to get photographs of it. So there's going to be a lot of coverage on this comet, no doubt. I think we just keep our fingers crossed that we're going to get to see something good. What do you think about it, Paul?
Well, I don't. Obviously, it's nice to see a bright comet in the sky. They're dramatic, they're vibrant, they're really, it's quite rare to see one. But I kind of don't mind what they do, because they are their own objects that are beautiful and have come a long way into the solar system. And I'm just happy to observe them. So I don't really have any invested interest into whether it becomes kind of like a Hale-Bopp or whether it's, just a faint magnitude 3 comet for a little while. I'm happy to observe it whatever. And I think in many ways we have a strange expectations in astronomy. We don't go to national parks or into forests with great demands on the trees and the valleys and the mountains. And I think we should do the same with comets. It will be whatever it is, but it's still a lovely object to observe.
Yeah, I mean, we are there to observe nature. We're not there to expect nature to put on a display for us.
That's right.
So you just take what you get with it. But the good thing about it is that once it reappears from the sun's glare, sort of about the 11th, 12th of October, it will then start to move into a reasonable position. So it's going to be observed for a little while in the evening sky, which is a bonus in its own right, because it'll be in darkness. It won't be one of these which is stuck in the glare of the sun. It will actually be in a decent position.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we keep our fingers crossed and we see what happens.
Yes, we continue to observe it and make observations and see what it does. I'm sure it will be a surprise in its own way.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, let's talk about the stars then. We'll go through this fairly quickly because we spent a bit of time on our specials, etc. But it's October, so of course we've still got the summer triangle visible, which is, we've got Cygnus the Swan, large constellation occupying the northeastern area of the summer triangle, depicting a south-flying swan with its wings outstretched. The swan's beak is marked by the beautiful binary star Albario, which is Beta Cygni, which is gorgeous.
Yeah, it is very pretty. Two components, one orange, the other sort of looks turquoise to me. I don't know whether that's a contrast effect from the orange primary giant, but it is a very, very splendid sight.
And southeast of Albario, we've got the rather underwhelming constellation of Vulpecula the Fox, which its original name was Vulpecula et Anza, the fox and the goose. And I say this often, but Patrick used to say, I remember, he goes, it's called the fox and the goose. I don't know where the goose has gone. I think the fox has eaten him. At one time, that was broken into two smaller patterns, actually, that represented both creatures. But it's not forgotten because I don't know if it's officially recognised. There's the International Astronomical Union are messing about with the star names and changing the official recognition of them. But it used to be called Anza, which is the goose, which is Alpha Vulpeculae. But you've got some great things in there, actually, because you've got the constellation is quite big. It runs up under the eastern wing of Cygnus, but it contains Brockie's cluster.
Yes, Collider 399, yeah.
Yeah, which is the coat hanger cluster, which is a bit of a misnomer because it's not actually a cluster at all. It's just a line of sight effect, which looks like the outline of a coat hanger. And you also got the Dumbbell Nebula, Messier 27, which is impressive, actually, as a planetary.
It is. The thing I like about some of these planetary nebulas, a bit like the Ring Nebula in Lyra, is they're actually stand up quite well to magnification, and you can see them, you can see structure in them. And I've had good views of the Dumbbell Nebula with really quite a small telescope, so it's definitely worth trying it out to find it.
I've seen it with binoculars. It stands out very, very easily, so it's a good one to go for, and it's a nice one to photograph as well. Great colours and just lots of stuff there to look at.
Yeah.
I suppose as we're getting into August, we're getting into the season of autumn. We're getting into the season of the horses. So near Vulpecula, if you go from Albario, you go through Vulpecula, then Sagitta the arrow, Delphinus the dolphin, you end up at Equuleus the foal, which is probably the most boring constellation in the entire night sky. Sorry, but it is. And then next to that, of course, you've got the wonderful Pegasus the flying horse, which is actually pretty faint in terms of constellations, but quite large. But it has that large pattern, which is it's supposed to be a square. The Great Square of Pegasus. It isn't a square, is it? But it's
no, it is. We'll call it the Square Pegasus because that's what it's called. But once you found it, it is quite a striking in the sky. Once you found it once, you'll have no difficulty picking it up again.
Yeah, and the head, because the horse is upside down, the head sits to the south west of the Great Square. It's a triangular shape. The bright star at the end of the head, which represents the horse's nose, is Enif, which is, if you go from the star which is at the bottom of the triangle representing the head, which is Baham, and then go through Enif, and then go for half that distance again, you come to M15, which is a fantastic globular cluster. That's really worth looking for. I like M15 a lot.
Yeah, it's a lovely globular M15.
Okay, well, I think we're probably coming up to time now, so we'll sign off with that. Good luck with the comet. Fingers crossed it does something exciting. And we're wishing you all clear skies. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Pete.